Meet the people who make the news. Listen to 920 AM and FM 96.5 KVEC.
Good morning and welcome to First Look. It is about 12 minutes after 8 o'clock, and it's a Wednesday morning, June the 18th. No stranger to the microphone. Eric Vanderlip is back in again. Weren't you just here last week?
I was, Andy. Good morning.
You were in to talk a little bit about what's going on at Coast Electronics and Radio Shack last week.
Yeah. And this week I'm here to talk to you about some amateur radio.
Yeah, we're talking ham this morning. I like that. Actually, yeah. I'm not a ham fan, but I am a ham radio fan. You brought a guest with you today, too.
Yeah, this is my friend Steve from the Central Coast Amateur Radio Group.
Steve, how you doing, sir?
Good. Thank you for having us this morning.
Thanks for joining us this morning. Really appreciate it. We're going to talk a little bit about ham radio. What I know when you were in last week, you started talking. We talked a little bit about what ham radio is, and a lot of people don't really understand. I mean, they know what amateur radio is because they listen to this show, but it's a little different kind of amateur radio. What describe what you work with?
So we work with lots of different frequency bands and promote emergency communications locally, regionally, and worldwide using different types of radios and antennas. And all of us amateur radio operators or ham radio operators, have a license to do so, and we like to do it.
So. Ham radio does the HAM stand for something?
That is, I guess, an acronym or a handle that had put on amateurs many, many years ago, and there are varying stories of the actual last names of some of the founders.
Wow.
HAM. There are other stories about. Like Arthur Godfrey was a ham radio operator, and I think he said he was just hamming it up sometime, and then it was supposed to be an insult to amateur radio operators, but they just picked it up and ran with it, and so it became ham radio.
So when you say amateur radio, that doesn't really compare it to radio stations, but what would be the difference between an amateur and a professional? Is that a fair question to ask?
When you're an amateur radio operator, you're not. I mean, there is some experimentation going on, but most of us are professionals on the radio.
I was going to say,
and it's kind of a little catch-22 there.
Yeah. So, what does it take? What does it take to be a ham radio operator? What kind of equipment do you have to get started?
Not too much, really. These days, you can get into amateur radio by taking a fairly simple test to get your technician license. Once you have that, you can buy a simple radio similar to the one that Eric has here for $25.
Wait, that's a ham radio there?
It is a very small ham radio.
It looks like a walkie-talkie.
It does.
It is.
Yeah. And it will transmit from here to a repeater, much like your radio station does.
Right.
A big tower on a mountain somewhere.
Right.
And then it will broadcast 50, 60, 70 miles in any direction, depending on mountains and obstacles in the way. And that's where we use most of our emergency equipment on the repeaters. Many years ago, there was the late 80s, there was a huge forest fire in the Santa Cruz Mountains.
Right.
And the CAL FIRE's radios did not work in the Santa Cruz Mountains very well. Too many dead spots. And so the amateur radio operator stepped in and linked all of her repeaters around the mountains. And then volunteers came in, and I went, and they sent me up with a crew chief to run around with him, checking on his crews, and then I would provide the communications for him.
Wow.
And that's what we do.
So what is it that makes ham radio come in and be usable when the fire department's radio is not? Is it just a case of where transmitters and repeaters are? Is it a different frequency?
It's all of the above. It's battery backup. It's solar. It's strategically placed repeaters. It's different types of communication, different frequencies that can go farther or bounce off the ionosphere, or maybe even sometimes we use bounce the signal off a satellite.
So now with the ham radios, it's not something, or I may be wrong, and it is. You walk into Coastal Electronics, buy one of those units, pick it up, breaker 19, I'm on, and I'm suddenly a ham radio operator. You mentioned a license? Do you have to take a test? Right? Do you have to have a license?
You have to have a license.
Oh, you do. Okay.
Yes. And these days there are technician license, general class license, and an extra class license, and they all have increasing degrees of difficulty to obtain. But the technician license is relatively easy. And in fact, Cal Poly, the Cal Poly Amateur Radio Club, will put on an event, I think once a month, where you walk in on a Saturday morning knowing nothing about amateur radio, and by the afternoon you'll have your technician license.
Oh, and be set to go. Mm-hmm. What is it, Eric, that excites you or that makes you want to be a ham radio operator? Is it the local listening to what's going on, or do you enjoy hopping on there and talking to somebody in Botswana?
For me, I like my favorite thing is to whenever the International Space Station flies over, I try and talk to an astronaut or two.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm going to geek out a little bit. That sounds like I would like that.
Oh yeah.
So now I'm thinking of all kinds of questions here. Now you can't obviously or do you just tune in a frequency and talk to an astronaut? Is it that simple?
You wait for it to fly over. You hope that they're on some of their downtime and that someone is in that Columbus module next to the radio, and you make a call. And if they pick up the microphone and answer, it's quite the event.
I'll bet it is. Now, is that a frequency that? It seems to me like that would be a frequency you get in trouble for using, or do they have a special something set aside up there so that people could contact them like that?
It is a set frequency. The Amateur Radio International Space Station program, they have a couple set different frequencies for contacts to be made to the space station or through the space station, and they also have are sending down slow scan television, so you can actually. With your computer and your ham radio, you can decode a picture that they're sending from space.
Wow.
Yeah, they do all sorts of cool stuff up there.
It does. It sounds really cool. Steve, tell me a little bit about the group and the club that you've got. Is that a pretty active club here on the Central Coast?
Yes, it is. And we have about 25 members, founded by Dave Qualls, KVEC AYK, about 2.5-3 years ago. And we're extremely active in emergency service. We are members of ARES, which is the Amateur Radio Emergency Service, and then RACES, which is the Radio Amateur Civil Emergency Service. And we practice all the time. We have nets every Tuesday where we practice making sure that all our equipment is working. We have battery backups, generators. And that's what Field Day is all about, just making sure that we can go out and set up a radio station on a moment's notice.
Okay, tell me about Field Day. So what goes on with Field Day?
So every year, all the U.S. amateur radio operators get together. This year it'll be June 28th, Saturday.
Okay.
Runs for 24 hours. And it's basically everyone sets up their stations and they try and make contacts. And the 3 local clubs here in San Luis Obispo County will all be having events. It's all open to the public. And if you wanted to talk on a ham radio, you can come down to one of them, and we'll be providing demonstrations. Some of us will be having testing sessions, and even up in Paso, we're going to be doing a little swap meet. So if you want to see some old radio gear, come on down. You can experience it. You can get on the air, kind of get your feet wet a little bit, and see if it's the hobby that's right for you.
If somebody wanted to get their feet wet, would you recommend going with something like you've got in front of you there, the little walkie-talkie type, or would you recommend that they buy something big enough to put at a desk and they sit down there with the microphone and everything in front of them?
I'm going to start with after you get your license, you'll have plenty of other amateur radio operators who will have an opinion about what radios you should buy.
That's taking the high road.
Yeah, and everyone usually starts off with a little handheld, but just like any hobby, before you know it, you're selling off your other hobbies to buy more radios.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm sure. I want to make sure, what else haven't I asked or haven't we talked about that you want to make sure we do talk about here this morning?
Just how about the locations of the events that are happening June 28th?
Okay, so and where are those events going to be?
The one in Arroyo Grande is going to be at the Rancho Grande Park in Arroyo Grande.
Okay,
that's on the corner of James Way and Rodeo Drive.
From what time to what time?
About 11 o'clock on Saturday to about 1 o'clock on Sunday. And
that's a long event.
We go for 24 hours straight.
Wow!
I managed to catch 2 hours of sleep one night, but we pretty much transmit all night. In fact, I think we made over 500 contacts last year, including Hawaii, Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico. So we're reaching out as far as we can.
Okay, so that's the one at Rancho Park.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the other ones?
Then the Estero Bay Club will be having their event also on Saturday, and that's going to be at the Cloister City Park in Morro Bay. They'll be operating Saturday and Sunday morning, and that's the Estero Bay Amateur Radio Club. And then the Paso Robles Amateur Radio Club will be starting around 11 o'clock on Saturday, right next door to the Estrella Warbirds Museum.
Okay.
We'll be set up with generators and be completely off-grid, just, simulating like an emergency. And we'll be operating multiple different stations, including ones for people who just want to get on the air and also for kids who want to get on the air. And, we're going to have, I think, a Boy Scout troop over there,
okay,
helping them get, their communications merit badge, getting them signed off on some things. And I personally am going to be taking my amateur radio extra exam, which is a really hard test. But I've been studying hard, and we're going to have a testing session there, and hopefully I'll pass.
Oh, good. Now what does the extra get you?
It's about it's a little more privilege on the bands, so I can talk a few more places. It's more about the prestige, I think, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if that's something that's important, you got to take it as far as you can. Now, it sounds like the ham radio operators are ready to step up. Sounds like if there was an emergency on the Central Coast, say another big earthquake hit and it took down power grids and everything else, that you guys are there to help out. How would somebody like me stay informed without having to go? If there was an emergency that happens, if I didn't know anybody who was a ham radio operator and I just wanted to listen in to find out what was going on, is there a simple receiver or a way that somebody can listen and, find out in an emergency what's happening?
Everyone can do that. If the internet is not down, you can go to what's called an SDR, and that's on just SDR.com, and that will bring up a list of transmitters across the entire world, really. And you can just pick one of those transmitters and listen in to what's going on. So if you don't know anything about ham radio, you can do that, and you can listen into people's conversations that are ham radio operators all over the world.
Well, it used to be you could buy a radio that was a battery operated radio that would have weather band, ham band, or said ham radio band.
Sure, and you still can.
You can.
We sell quite a few different ones, whether it's on the shortwave bands or in the VHF.
Shortwave is the word I was looking for.
Yeah. Even a police scanner can be tuned in to receive the local ham radio frequencies, and that is something I usually program in for some of my customers. I'm like, hey, do you want the emergency ham channel in there just in case?
Right.
And it works out well, and it kind of gets them interested. And for if you're a prepper or if you just want to have that sense of security, you can come out and talk to us, and we have different avenues. Whether it's a ham radio or what's called GRMRS, which the CERT team uses and the HEAT team uses, for their local events and volunteer organizations. So
I didn't even think you might know about the HEAT team. The HEAT team does some really good work.
Yeah.
CERT does as well. I mean, but with the HEAT, the Horse Emergency Evacuation Team, they in fact they were just part of a fire here recently, and they had those trailers out. All right. Again, we've got just a couple of minutes left here. Let's make sure people know how to get a hold of you and websites and things if they'd like to find out more about what's going on locally.
The Central Coast Amateur Radio Group has a website at centralcoastamateurradiogroup.com or ccarg.com. lots of information on there, lots of links to other places where you can get information.
Okay.
ARRL.com is the Amateur Radio Relay League, and they have all the information that you could ever want.
Steve, how did you get started in this?
Started out with CB radios like many of us did many years ago, and then around 1984 I got my technician license. And at that time you had to learn Morse code to get a license.
Really?
Yeah, 5 words per minute. And then to get the next license, I had to learn 13 words per minute. And the extra class at that time, you had to learn 20 words per minute, and that was a bridge too far. And so I went up to the advanced stage, which was basically an extra, but with only 13 words per minute.
Wow. And so that means you're learning Morse code too?
Andy, I'm starting to. When I got my license in 1992, I didn't. Unfortunately, fortunately for me, the code requirement had been dropped.
Oh, okay.
So I got my technician class, and then about 8 years ago, I went over to Cal Poly and I studied for my general, and I passed that one. And so I've just taken baby steps over the years.
All right. Once again, Eric and Steve are in from Central Coast Amateur Radio Group. Eric, I'm sure we're going to hear from again because he'll be in with Coast Electronics at some point here, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks for dropping by.
Thank you, Andy.
Steve, thanks a lot. You betcha. Have a wonderful day. That's going to wrap up this segment. We finish things off today with Terry Banish from the city of